The Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Welcome to another edition of the Spot Track Podcast. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Thursday, May 25th. It's a big basketball show. Game 5, Boston-Miami tonight. Total who does it? No idea where this one's going. I'm kind of rooting for a longer series here. I think it's been a good battle. But we're going to talk about the series that just finished with Keith Smith. That is the Lakers. It's not just about what do they do next, but the Austin Reaves conversation, which I know it's getting a lot of wind. It's worthy. There's a restricted free agency conversation to be had every year. Most of the times it never pans out. It either turns into a trade or just a nothing extension. And I don't think that's going to be the case here with Austin Reaves. I think there's going to be teams that come in firing hot, especially some of these young teams, maybe even the Spurs, who now have won the lottery with Wembanyama and want to immediately start to build. And the Lakers certainly need to keep him because he did plenty throughout the regular season and through the postseason to prove that he is a viable number 3 option behind the twin towers of LeBron and Anthony Davis. So Keith's got tons of thoughts and specifics on what the Lakers can do initially, what an outside team can offer in terms of an offer sheet, why this is a poison pill situation, and his thoughts on where this might be headed for both sides. And then we talk a little bit more about the Lakers themselves, bunch of UFAs, couple of option decisions, a tax situation to think about. How are they going to operate from a timing standpoint this offseason? And what does that mean for players they can bring in July 1st when it's free agency and the wheels start to turn for the 2023 season? And then, because it gets harder and harder every year to evaluate this, the top free agents in the NBA when July 1st gets here. It's a trade league. It's an extension league. It's really not a free agent league anymore. And a lot of the sports leagues are going in this direction. If you're good enough, you're just going to get the contract and we'll deal with what we have to do later. But there are some names, and Keith's got a pretty solid top 10 and reasoning for it and some financials to go surrounding it. And there are notable names. This is not the scraping the bottom of the barrel to pull some names together, even though on our free agent tracker, you don't have to scroll too far to start finding complementary backup wings, right? It's not a deep offseason from a free agency standpoint, but Keith has identified at least 10 names that should be in play for most of these teams with cap space in the next couple of months. But first, a little NFL off the top here. Austin Ekeler worked out a renegotiated final contract year with the Los Angeles Chargers to remain for the 2023 season. He'll be age 28 and change through the upcoming season, which is that bugaboo age for running backs, as you know. And clearly when he was given a chance to explore a trade, to explore a contract extension with another team, he did not find what he was looking for because he is right back here at the cost of a 1.75 max incentive package, which we don't have the actual specifics for, but we have enough to understand what's happening here. He can gain $1 million if he goes 1,600 plus yards from scrimmage. He got pretty damn close to that last season. So about 75% of that is going to be likely to be earned. So there's some cap implications here, no question about it. From a touchdown standpoint, he had a huge season last year, as you know, if you drafted him high in fantasy and rewarded for it. Okay, this was an 18 touchdown season in 2022 for Austin Ekeler. He only needs to get to 16 to get to max out at $600,000 in incentives. So all of that is likely to be earned. And that would mean $1.6 million, and the other $150,000 comes from a Pro Bowl berth, something he has never received in his career. So there's the 175. There's incremental thresholds and tiers built into the yards and the touchdowns. You have to think if he's healthy, he's going to get here, and that's how he's thinking. So at the end of the day, it's not a multi-year extension. It's not brand new guaranteed money. It's simply if you're the same player you were last year, maybe even a slightly better from a yards from scrimmage standpoint, we'll tack on 175 to the 6.25 you were set to make this year, which would mean $8 million cash for the 2023 season. And if I run the rankings from running back cash for the upcoming season, $8 million is 13th, ahead of Miles Sanders, behind James Conner, way behind the 3 franchise tag players in Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, and Saquon Barkley. And the Henrys and the Chubbs and the Aaron Jones of the world are well above that number as well. The breadwinner is going to be Bijan Robinson with that signing bonus on the rookie contract. But from a true base value, Christian McCaffrey at $12 million is the highest cash salary for running backs in 2023, with Alvin Kamara at $11 million right behind him, though he may lose a bit of that from suspension if things kind of work out the way we think they're going to work out in the next couple of months here. So that's it. An incentive package that gets him basically to top 14 cash for 1 year. That's what it is. That's where the running back market is. I hate to beat a dead horse with this stuff, but it's just the way of the world right now. Teams are going to let these kind of players go out and explore trades, because honestly, if you can get a decent draft pick for a player like this that is considered to be replaceable, even though I think some stand above that moniker, the teams would rather go that route. That's why we're going to see Dalvin Cook released here. It's why I think Derrick Henry is on the bubble right now. I don't know what that Tennessee team is doing. I believe Joe Mixon remains on the bubble. I don't know the Saquon Barkley future. Does he ever sign this franchise tag? Does he forfeit $10 million? Probably not. Same with Josh Jacobs, and so on and so on. We saw great running backs, really good 3-down running backs, earn themselves about $1.3 million this year. The Damian Harrises of the world, and there were 4 or 5 names out there. It's just where we're going. Rashad Penny had a career year, turned it into $1.35 million, 25% of that guaranteed at signing. That's just where we're headed. So get used to it. I'm going to continue to talk about it, and I'm going to continue to point out when players rise above it. So if there is a situation, right, where Saquon Barkley does bag a 4 for $60 with even 2 years of that fully guaranteed, we're going to highlight it as much as possible, because it's something it's going to become a unicorn situation soon. The McCaffrey contract might be the last big running back contract we ever see at this position. It's perfectly possible that this position operates solely through the draft, and that even as a first-round pick with a good contract, with good cash, right, Bijan's going to make himself upwards of $22 million here as the number 8 overall pick. That's fully guaranteed. There is a 5th-year option which can push this thing past $30 million. That's going to be considered great money at this position, even with the cap rising into the 250s at some point in time here. That's just where we are. You need 4 running backs. You need 4 wide receivers too. And you need 3 tight ends. And you need 3 quarterbacks rostered. So everybody's going to have depth, but no position has been deflated more than this one. And Austin Ekeler's unsuccessful triumph through finding more guaranteed money is just the latest indication that this thing is not getting any better, but in fact is actually getting worse. Running backs, by the way, should settle for this incentive package if it's the only option. They should take as much money as humanly possible available to them and just go out there and earn it. And just to keep this train moving. At some point in time, there may be a shift. There may be a world where defenses are schemed possible to take away the pass, even though the game is literally built from a rule standpoint to be a passing league, and that the injuries at some point in time in the passing game start to add up or come or near what we were seeing from the running game and the ground and pound attack. It's possible that this thing is cyclical and it comes back at some point in time, but we are at the bottom of that barrel right now for the running back. And unfortunately, Austin Ekeler is the last evidence of that. Okay, let's talk some basketball. It's a great conversation with Keith coming up next on all things Lakers, Austin Reaves, and NBA free agency. All right, time to talk a little basketball as the playoffs sort of wind down here anticlimactically. Keith, thanks for joining. Let's get right into it. The Lakers are out. The Lakers have been swept. LeBron's future's in question. A lot of the roster's in question, but I want to start with some positive because the Austin Reaves situation got better and better as the year went on. Certainly he was a factor in the postseason, and now he is eligible for restricted free agency. There's a lot out there about this. I want to start with a softball question that I don't know is being asked enough. I cover all of these sports closely with this, and restricted free agency has become a wink, wink, we're not going to do this situation in many of the leagues. How is it in the NBA? Is it still a viable option for other teams to send offer sheets in, or is it frowned upon for the most part, except for certain instances?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There is a couple different schools of thought on this. There are a handful of teams, mostly led by the ownership group rather than like the general manager, who just they don't believe in playing the restricted free agency game. So what they generally prefer to do is, hey, if we want the guy and you're willing to let him go, let's just work out a deal. Like, let's work out some kind of sign and trade or something where we can do that. Now, there's sometimes, because of the hard cap and the things that factor in if you do complete a sign and trade and that acquire a player via sign and trade, that is, that it's not viable to do a sign and trade. So then the only way to get a guy is restricted free agency. And then there's another group that is, hey, the way for these players to get the most money possible sometimes, which is the case with Austin Reaves, is to actually sign an offer sheet because of the NBA has, I think it's fair to say, some weird contractual rules at times on, how these salaries come together and work. That can put you in a spot where you have to sign these guys to the offer sheet versus just signing them outright to the same exact contract yourself. So that's kind of how it goes. And then there's still definitely the teams that are like, hey, we have cap space and we can be a spoiler here, or at very least, we're going to take you off the board for the next couple years by making you pay a guy, twice as much as you're interested in, or something in that realm. So that definitely exists too. It's kind of, all sides are still go on this. And I think, any team who says this is how we will always handle it, let me know when you're sitting there with $40 million in cap space and there's a guy you like.
Right. And that's the thing, you don't want to burn bridges. You might get yourself into a John Wall situation where you need somebody to buy the contract off of you, and you need to have the relationships sort of forged. But all those points you made, obviously valid, all fall under Austin Reaves here, right? There's a world where he deserves the max amount of money that he can make at this point of his career. There's a world where there's probably 3 or 4 teams out there that would love to stick it to the Lakers here. Before we get to it and get into the numbers specifically, Keith, how often do offer sheets happen on average per offseason here?
We get about 1 or 2 realistic each offseason. Now, every once in a while, those are the DeAndre Ayton style last year of go ahead and sign an offer sheet and we're going to match it, which is always, to me, that's a little silly, right? Because that's, that's a good way, I think, to make sure the player next time they're a free agent is like, see you later, right? I'm out of here. That's what happened very famously with Gordon Hayward in the Utah Jazz. So now what we saw with Ayton is the Suns are like, here's our number. If you can get more in an offer sheet, go. But we'll still probably match it even all the way up to the max. And that's ultimately what happened. The Indiana Pacers, who have generally fallen in the camp of, hey, we're not going to play the offer sheet game. Let's just work out a trade. That's what they did with Malcolm Brogdon back in the day to get him, to be fair, not when they traded him to Boston. But that wasn't going to happen with the Suns. So they said, all right, let's do it. Let's sign him to an offer sheet. That might have been, let's, get some goodwill with his agency and with the player for maybe down the line or something of that, ilk. But so you get those, but every once in a while you do get one where it is, all right, we're going to sign a real offer sheet here and see if the team will blink. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It all kind of depends as it comes together.
All right, lay out the numbers for me. What can the Lakers do initially speaking, and then versus what can an outside team do? Let's say the Spurs, for instance.
Yeah, so the Lakers can give him what I like to call the Dinwiddie extension. Other people call it other things. I just call it that because it's what kind of the extension he did there. So what that would be is let me make sure I get this number correct. They can offer him direct about $60 million over 4 years. Okay. And that's with, kind of the standard raises off of that. And that's because they have very, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Yeah, $58 million. Sorry, that was my fault on that one. Mm-hmm. So what happens there is that's what they can give him in that kind of offer sheet. So what happens in this situation is with Reaves, because he's Arenas limited and they have early bird rights on him, the Lakers are limited in what they can offer, which is $58 million. Starting at about just under $13 million and going up from there. Then what happens though in an offer sheet, if he gets it, let's say a team says, unless you want to spend, do you want to spend any more time on what the Lakers can do?
I do. I think this is one of the more fascinating points here. Yeah.
Yep. So if we pause on the Lakers side of it, what happens is that's probably not going to be enough in reality for him right at this point. I think he's proven he's worth more money than that. Now, there was a point a couple months ago where it might have been, all right, this is where we're at with Austin Reaves, and this is what the number is. Now, coming off a great playoff run, that's probably not where he's at anymore. So I think what we're going to look at in this situation is he is going to be in a spot where it's going to become, how do we get to the most maximum possible money we can get to? And that's where we land at, probably through an offer sheet process.
Okay. And that's what, about 90 million, 95 million over 4?
Almost 100 million. Yeah. It's essentially, so here's where these Arenas offer sheets get a little wonky. So this is a little bit hard in a visual or an audio medium, but I'll lay it out. So what happens in the first year is, because he's an Arenas level free agent, they're going to give the Lakers the opportunity to match on him up to what is effectively the same as the taxpayer mid-level, which is about $12.2 million.
Right.
Year 2 on that would go up 5% raise to about $12.8 million. So pretty normal contract to that point. Where it gets super crazy then the contract in the offer sheet, and the team offering him this can do it one of two ways. Either they can say, hey, we're going to do this as kind of the average salary through the 4 years, or we can do this same structure, but this would be the structure match for the Lakers, to be clear. So $12.2 million first year, $12.8 million. Well, all right, so we're at roughly, let's call it $25 million. We still got $75 million and $100 million. How does that break out, right? Because I think most people know you can't jump your contract 3 times the amount from year to year. Well, in this case, you can. Yeah. So what happens is it goes up to the 25% max amount, which would be $36.85 million in year 3. And then in year 4, you get a slight raise off that of 4.5%. Up to 38.5. And that's how we get to the full max number of just over 100 million is what another team can offer him. That's where we land out.
Okay, a couple things I want to get out there, and please confirm as we go here. The Lakers can match any offer sheet because they do have early rights on him, right? It's not like there's a threshold that a team can go that the Lakers can't get to. It's simply, do they want to match it, right?
Yeah, so this is where order of operations will end up being really, really important for the Lakers, because what happens in this situation is they would basically land out at the if they, let's say they did a sign and trade, let's say they went and got Kyrie Irving, because that one just won't go away, and they went and traded, did a sign and trade to get him. Then what would happen is they would be subject to the hard cap, and a team could potentially put in an offer sheet where the amount would take them over that hard cap, and they wouldn't be able to do that. But outside of that very specific single scenario, the Lakers have the ability to basically do whatever it is they need.
Okay, so from a Reaves standpoint then, and I think it's pretty likely that we're headed in this direction. Would you agree? I guess I should ask you that. Do you believe an outside offer sheet is coming, Keith, on Austin Reaves?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you can't sign more than one offer sheet. You can only sign one, but I think he's going to have probably 3-4 teams at least offering him, because he's a very easy to fit player for basically every team that has cap space. That we project to have cap space, and there are 7 of them. You could look at it and say, yeah, every single one of those teams would absolutely love to have Austin Reaves, coming in at a salary between 20-25 million, because he would fit on all of those teams basically perfectly.
And that's the other caveat. You have to have cap space to make the offer sheet, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can write an offer sheet just direct for the tax or non-taxpayer mid-level. So they could do an offer sheet in the non-taxpayer mid-level, again, projects to be $12.2 million. So you could do a 4-year, $52 million offer sheet. But in that case, Austin Reaves would just say, well, I'll just sign for the max I can anyway with the Lakers and forget that, offer sheet. I'll do, the bump over it because that's less money than the Lakers are going to offer him the most that they can right out of the gate, which is again at about 58 million or so. So he wouldn't even entertain those kind of things because it doesn't make sense because the Lakers would immediately match it and he'd have lost about $6 million, $6 million or so.
Okay. One more point on this from both sides, and then we'll get to a deeper dive into the Lakers specifically here. What is in Austin Reaves' best interest with this? Is jumping ship to the Spurs or the Thunder or one of these teams, obviously one of the 7 or 8 teams with cap space who are going to be, a fringe contender for the play-in, let's put it that way, at very much, versus the last 2 seasons of LeBron and possibly AD in Los Angeles, right? If this really is a split contract where it's 2 years at cost, essentially, and then 2 years of inflated cost, which is how this is going to work, that poison pill structure, does it make sense for him to do this somewhere else and max out at the near 100 million? Or is there a world where Austin Reaves' best play here for at least the next couple of seasons is to stay right where he is? He's going to make the same salaries, right? It's over the next 2 seasons.
Yep.
And then move on to a situation that might be beneficial both financially and from a basketball standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, there's that thought too, right? It's the important thing in restricted free agency that I think people forget is, yes, the team can match, but the player still has full control over what they signed for in the first place, right? So Austin Reaves, I mean, he could also sign the qualifying offer. He's not going to because that's only $2.2 million, but he could do that if he wanted to, and then you'll go in. There's a thought out there what the Lakers could try to get him to do is, hey, let's do a 1+1 deal.
I was just going to ask that. Why wouldn't he just slow play this? Because the same money is going to be available as long as he doesn't fall off a cliff from a basketball standpoint, right?
Exactly. And now I think if you're Austin Reaves and you're looking at it and saying, man, I've made peanuts relatively. If I can get $100 million, I'm going to get it. Because if I, shoot 32% from the field next year and have a rough season, now people think about me differently, right? So right now, I mean, I'm not going to say this is as good as it will ever get for him, because I think he's going to be a good player for a long time. But I think, hey, if I can get $100 million, fully locked in, like, let's go. Let's get that $100 million and move on. So I think that's where it gets a little tricky. But yeah, for him, I think you take, whatever the max you can get right now is, just because of where he's coming from in his first couple of years. This guy started on a 2-way contract and the like. The other side thing with this, just because it's kind of funny, is the Lakers are now in a position where it is, hey, this is part of why we have this second round signing exception rule coming in the new CBA. I partially teasingly call it the Pelinka rule, because he kept signing his second round picks to only 2-year deals, and it kind of cost him with Taylor Horton Tucker. Now it's costing him with Reaves. It's just become a little bit of a messy thing that they've done. So now in the future, you can, if the player agrees, you can go up to a 4-year deal for that player. So that's become kind of a little bit of a funny thing there. But yeah, this is this is potentially because of that new piece. This is one of the last times we may see this become a major thing for these teams with an arenas type offer sheet. And I think this is why again, some of those teams that are in this spot, they may say, yeah, let's get it done. Let's go.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a really good point. There's a lot changing. I know that's kind of the elephant in the room, that super tax situation. But for teams like this, look, if the Lakers were to match a max 4-year for Austin Reaves here, and they're dealing with 38 million 3 years, that could put them in a situation where, if there's 3 or 4 stars on this team at that point in time, maybe not even LeBron, that could be a situation where they'd have to move off a contract. So all right, from the Lakers standpoint,
Sorry, I just have to say this. I
Please.
appreciate so much that you called it the super tax. That just warms my heart. I am going to make that happen, one way or another. So thank you so much.
I'm in on it for sure. I'll join you on the Palinka rule too.
Let's go.
Let's go with everything here. Let's name everything, Keith. All right. From the Lakers side, you've mentioned how many of these offer sheet situations get converted into sign and trades. I would agree that's probably the best case for a lot of scenarios. Where do the Lakers fall here? Is signing this, is matching whatever the best case because of LeBron's window, because of AD's window? Both are basically on a 1+1, right? I mean, AD's got an ETO after this upcoming season. This window is slamming shut as quickly as it started, really. So just throwing a 4-year backloaded contract for Austin Reaves into this mess, make it work, or is it going to be more trouble than not?
Yeah, so the first phase of this is I think the Lakers are going to stay as an over the cap team. Mm-hmm. I think all this Kyrie Irving stuff is just noise. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, if anybody ever in the history of the game, if you told me they're going to take $10 million less in first year salary than they could get anywhere else, $20 million less in first year salary, it's like, all right, Kyrie's the one I can believe would do it. But I think what we're in a spot in this situation is I think they're going to stay over the cap. They're going to keep Reeves. They're going to keep Rui Hachimura. They're probably going to do what they can to keep Dennis Schroeder, Lonnie Walker, and operate as an over-the-cap team. So in that world where you're not wiping the deck clean of salary to some extent, you probably have to approach it as we have to put the best possible team that we can around LeBron and AD. And Austin Reaves is definitely a big part of that. So I think you match it. Then you let that, jump into the $30+ million salary range. Let that be, tomorrow's problem to deal with, down the line. And the reality is there's a chance we'll see how they play this out. Because I also think some players, there's two things that in play here for the Lakers, right? As you said, you've got AD and LeBron under contract for next year. The year after, player options, right, for both of those guys. They can move on if they want to. So you might have 1 year, you might have 2 years. Then in the summer of 25-26, that's when the cap is expected to go up, the maximum 10% that is now going to be allowable because of the cap smoothing with the new TV contract. So what you're going to see is you could have a Lakers team by the time the Reeves contract kicks in at $36 million or whatever it is. That might be the only salary on the books. Because you might have wiped everything else, because I think you're going to have two things at play for them. One, players are going to say, all right, I'll sign up for a year or two and tie myself to however long LeBron and AD may be here. Or you might have players just flat out saying, I'd like to be a free agent in 2025 when the cap's going to go up 10%. So that's the other piece. So they give you the Lakers. I match that offer sheet, move on, let it kind of be. Yeah, $36 million is going to be too much for Austin Reaves 2 years from now, no matter almost what happens, realistically. But it's not going to be something where it's like, oh my gosh, we can't build out the roster because we have him at $36 million. They'll be able to plan and do what they need to do. It's
going to be half the top salary in basketball at the time. I mean,
pretty close.
We're going to be at $70 million at that point. Don't you? Yeah. Don't you agree?
I'd have to game it out and look at who could be free agents that year, right, and what's the most they could sign for and all that. But we're getting close. I mean, the reality is, I know we're talking 5 years down the line here, but if Jason Tatum signs the Supermax that he's now eligible for and adds the most possible years to his deal that he can, he'll be a $70 million player in the final year of that contract.
And that's going to happen next summer. Don't you agree?
I 100% think so. I don't think there's any doubt that he signs for that.
All right. So I think I'm kind of reading your tea leaves. It's going to be more of the same for the Lakers. And why not? Right. I think this team overachieved for the last stretch run here after that deadline and some really savvy GM work from Palinka. Why not run this thing back as long as LeBron is going to run this back? I don't think there's a morsel in you that believes he's actually retiring. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, just an exhausted player saying things after the game. That's all.
Yeah, that's it. Raw, physically hurting, emotionally hurting. One of his best friends just retired that same morning. I think he's looking at it and saying, man, 5 months from now, I got to be ready to do this again. And it probably seems like that's an impossible task then. But yeah, I think, let him get his feet up for a couple months here. And if there's a surgery, I do think the Lakers have to be, run it back, but also run it back with, you got to make some tweaks. You have to have more front court depth. Yeah. Because, AD and LeBron combined, they're going to play in probably each play in 60 games, feels like the high end for those guys just at this point in their careers. And there's a lot of stuff out there of, the Lakers go to LeBron and be like, hey, you want to skip the whole East Coast road trip? Done. Like we don't care. Like whatever it is we need to do to get you ready and have you ready, for the playoff push. But yeah, so I think you run it back for the most part, make some tweaks around the edges, fill out your depth a little bit, and they're in a much, much better place than they were a year ago when the roster was really James, Davis, Russell Westbrook, and a whole bunch of guys on minimums. Now, through those trades, they really rebuilt themselves in a way where this is a team. If you just rolled in with this same roster next year, that's probably a top 16 in the West. And that's already a much better spot than you were in this past season.
If they're going to stay over and operate from a timing standpoint that way, are they just limited to exceptions for signing free agents at that point?
Yeah. And there's pending, what happens with not so much Reaves, because I think we can very confidently pencil him in for that $12.2 million amount, or potentially more if he did just say, I just do want to resign with the Lakers. It's really pending how much they give Hachimura. They could be, and arguably should be, in a position to use the full non-taxpayer MLE at $12.2 million. So if they do that, that they're going to be in decent shape. They also, I think it's going a little under looked and talked about is, they have the ability to trade the 2023 pick. They have to do it after they'd make the selection. So that'd be one where it's like the Lakers are picking for Team X here. And then, they trade that pick away to get something, in a prearranged deal. That could be how that goes down. So they've got a lot more optionality that didn't exist a year ago.
Okay, fair enough. It's a positive approach for sure. Speaking of which, I guess, right, let's get to some free agency. I know it's early, but it's kind of where most of the league already is right now, right? Yep. Operating in off-season mode, and it's not a great free agent list. It really never is going to be again in this league because of the way that they operate with rights and how frivolous teams are with trading, which is great for transactional people like us, Keith. But let's just talk about raw free agents, players who are actually eligible for unrestricted free agency right now. No option situations. I mean, I guess you can throw in an option that is absolutely going to be punted on if you want to, but do you have a kind of a hard and fast top 10 players that are going to be available for teams with cap space or with some sort of sign and trade eligibility ahead of them here?
Yeah, in general, what I do when I lay these free agents out, and you can see this over on Spot Track. If anyone wants to look, I use the same process teams do, which is, and I'm not saying my thoughts are the same as every team, but teams basically plug guys into the all-star tier, starter tier, rotation tier, and fringe tier. And what happens in those is all-star doesn't mean every single one of these guys was an all-star, but it's they play it at an all-star type level. Starter is, they start or they have the same rough impact as a starter. Like a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, for example. He came off the bench all year for Boston, but if he was a free agent this summer, and to be clear, he is not, he would be in the starter tier. And then the rotation tier is guys that are rotation players, right? Some of them start, some of them, maybe come on, most of them come off the bench, but these are just good, solid rotation players. And then fringe guys are exactly what it sounds like. They're the end of the bench guys that, they're basically replacement level across the board. So when we get there this summer, then the next piece is I start looking as I'm going to rank these guys. All right, this guy's a free agent, but there are free agents and there's guys who are, he's a free agent, but he's definitely going to resign. The kind of fun thing about this summer is none of the top guys are absolutely in that boat where it's like, well, there's no way that player is leaving. There's some we can look at and say, maybe, maybe not. But yeah, if we get into the top 10 guys, I have at the top of the list James Harden, who, if we were having this conversation a year ago, I would have said, all right, yeah, he's the top free agent, but he's not leaving Philly. Now all of a sudden it's like, I don't know, maybe he is going to go to Houston because that just won't go away. And that buzz keeps building for him. Similar guy on the next level, Kyrie Irving is my number 2 overall free agent, unrestricted free agent. Dallas looks like maybe we'll see. There were reports that there was a handshake deal. Kyrie himself came out yesterday and was like, don't listen to anybody but me. I'm one of one in my agency too, because he operates himself. So it is, he basically was like, hey, nothing's decided and I'm not going to rush and we'll figure it out with that. So those are my top 2 guys. And, there was a point where normally you'd be like, all right, they're free agents, but they're not going anywhere. So let's move down the list. But I think there is a chance both of those guys could be in different spots next
where are they financially?
The teams or the 2 players?
Just those 2 players.
How much they should
make. There's a world where James Harden is still a max player to some people. Sure. I guess if Kyrie is this high on the list, he's going to bank, right? I mean, he's not going to be signing for an exception unless it's a wink-wink situation with the Lakers like you've already alluded to. But I mean, if these guys are the guys still, which I cannot believe that they are, but they are, we're going big again, aren't we?
Yeah, I would struggle to see James Harden leave the Sixers for anything less than a max. That just wouldn't make sense to me, in that situation. And I think, I completely disagree. And I wrote this in their offseason preview. If I'm the Rockets, I'm not playing with this. This is not the direction I would go. Yeah. But it seems like they're going to, and that's probably a max deal. There's a rumor Brian Windhorst from ESPN reported yesterday that Philly doesn't want to give him the max. Philly is in a spot where they don't really feel like he should be a max player. So I think what happens in that situation is we get into a spot where it is, all right, well, if he's not really a max player, what are we doing? Where are we going from the Philadelphia side on this? My guess is it'd be close enough to a max that it wouldn't really matter. Then with Kyrie Irving, like I laid out, this could go any number of ways. My guess is probably does just end up back in Dallas on a max deal. Okay. And then a year or 2 from now, we're having the conversation about, well, Kyrie doesn't want to be in Dallas anymore. Who's going to trade for him and where is this going to go? The other thing with James Harden, that just one last thing that I want to point out with this, and I wrote this when I wrote up his kind of next contract piece for the site, he's limited by the over 38 rule. Right. Coming into play for him. So he's functionally limited to a 4-year deal with Philly and without. So that does not, normally it's that 5th year at, $50+ million. In his case, it'd be 60 million. That makes the major difference between re-signing with a team and leaving for somewhere else. In this case, it's $9 million or so is the difference. And I don't think James Harden really cares about $9 at this point. If he wants to be in Houston, he's going back to Houston. That's just the reality of it.
Man, I just think that the buzz when he signs a 4 for $211 or whatever it's going to be is going to be. It's just the NBA in a nutshell is really what it is. Everybody continues to get money no matter what happens.
Absolutely.
Keep running. Who's on your list here? Any big men we can talk about here?
So guy who I think is really, really in play, Chris Middleton is the 3rd guy on my list. Got a player option, but he's definitely going to opt out, if for no other reason, to add more years to his next contract. He wants to lock up his next 4 or maybe 5 years if he stays with the Bucks. He's another guy, could approach maybe a max, probably won't. He's probably going to come in slightly under that. Again, a lot of buzz that he could be in play. Part of the reason why he's in play is the looming super tax concerns for the Milwaukee Bucks. If they re-sign Middleton to, let's just say $30 million even, they're going to be so expensive moving forward. They're going to have a hard time to fill out the rest of the roster. Because here's what happens. Here's some of the stuff that's coming in. If you are a super tax team, you will be immediately this summer, the super tax teams, which right now that's the Warriors and the Clippers, then a handful of other teams may join them. You don't have the taxpayer mid-level exception. That just goes away. You can't use that. That's the big one they're hitting you with right off the jump. In the future years, starting in the summer of 2024, they're basically giving everybody a year to, hey, get your stuff in order here before we start really dropping the hammer on you. What's going to happen then in that summer? You won't have the taxpayer mid-level. Tax penalties are much harsher. You're going to get hit with harder penalties. in trades, you can't aggregate players together in trades anymore. So you can't take an $11 million player and a $12 million player and go get yourself a $25 million player. It's dollar for dollar by one player. So it's going to be much harder for you to make trades. That's going to lead to something. I'm not going to get into it in these top 10 guys, but you're going to see players over the next year plus get contracts where you're like, ooh, that feels hefty, right? That feels like, 10 million more than what I thought he would get in a season, because what they're going to do for those guys is we need to turn them into walking trade exceptions, right? I need 25 million in matching salary. So I'm going to pay my $15 million player 25 million because, I don't care about the tax penalty on that. I need to build out my roster flexibility. The other thing that's obviously going to happen, which could happen here with Chris Middleton, the Bucks could get squeezed, and they may look at it and be like, yeah, we are not the Warriors or the Clippers or the Nets or any of these teams that this was designed to really punish. So we're in a spot now where, all right, we're in a different world, and we need to look at this, a little bit differently here. And that's where I think we're going to get into a spot where, all right, this is going to be look different now, right? We're now all of a sudden it's going to be, all right, Chris Middleton, this is the most we can give you. Oh, one of these cap space teams thinks you're the missing piece to push them over the top, and you can get more than that. All right, good luck. We'll fill it out around Giannis and Drew Holiday as best we can, other ways.
Wow. It makes sense. New coach.
Yeah.
Brooke Lopez is also a UFA right now. It could be a decent amount of turnover in Milwaukee this offseason, no question. All right, who's next?
Yep. All right, Draymond Green is my fourth guy. Yeah, he slipped, but still one of the absolute best defenders in the league. I don't think he leaves the Warriors. I know that's kind of been out there and floated, but I think in the end, that's a situation where everybody comes to their, common sense and says, hey, we're better together than we ever are apart. Let's try to tie you and Clay and Steph together contractually, so all your deals are wrapping up at the same time. And, let's continue to make runs at this over the next couple of years and ride off into the sunset together.
I assume you believe Jordan Poole will be traded then.
I think there's a chance. Yeah, I think there's a good chance. I think again, not out of any sense of can't afford it, because the Warriors can clearly afford him, but out of the roster flexibility piece of it, it's going to be, all right, we've got to get some stuff in line. And I think what you're going to see is they're going to do what they can to say, all right, we won the title a year ago, but this year we got bounced. We want to make the most of these last couple years of, near peak level, I guess, of these guys, or, at least, contender level. Let's trade Jordan Poole. Maybe we move Jonathan Kuminga. Maybe we move draft picks. Let's really try to do what we can to load up to try to get ourselves in a spot where we can really contend.
I actually think Jordan Poole's the one that's going to pull that trigger. And
possible.
Go to the front office and say, look, I think I'm better served elsewhere, and try to restart my process here. And it probably benefits everybody. Does Draymond just get the Jordan Poole contract then, or is 32 a year just way too much?
Yeah, that's probably a little high. I'm thinking he's probably going to be more in the 25 range-ish. And this may be one, too, where it's time to, all right, we'll give you 30 in year one, but then it's going to knock down over the next couple years for him. I think we're definitely at that point for Draymond Green. I would not be giving him the 8% raises each year. So we go to the next guy on the list, Fred VanVleet. His name's been all sorts of stuff at the trade deadline. The Raptors hung on to him. Generally, that would signal to me, all right, they're going to try to re-sign him. But I think that was more of a case of, hey, we're still trying to be good. Like we don't want to bottom this team out mid-season. So Fred VanVleet, he's kind of hitting the weird spot in his career where he's going to be 29, going in, he's 29 now, be, turn 30 midway through next season. So that starts to be a little bit of still a warning flag, or I guess a signpost is a better way to put it, for small guards, but can play on, off ball. He's somebody I know a lot of the cap space teams have been linked to. So we'll see. And there's a big sense of Toronto may be hitting the, not the blow it up button, but the reset button. Like let's go back a little bit here. Let's retool around Siakam, Anunoby, Barnes. Maybe just two of those three, and let's start doing this. And that's where VanVleet could get caught up in the wash.
I think it's a team many teams are identifying as poachability, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. The Barnes and maybe Anunoby. And then I do think Siakam's one of those big time trade candidates this offseason. It's been a couple years coming. All right. Couple more.
Agreed. All right, so I'm going to go into two guys who are in situations that I like to call, let's keep an eye out on June 30 for extensions for these guys. And that's Jeremy Grant and Brook Lopez. Different players, obviously, and different kinds of players, but both are guys who are, neither one, in my opinion, are max salary type players. Both of them can get enough of a bump over their current contracts that it makes sense to extend. And both of them are in situations where I think their teams would rather keep them than see them leave. So I think in Jeremy Grant's case, I think he is hopeful that there's more money waiting for him in free agency than maybe is out there that he can get just by extending. But I think this may be one by, because, God forbid anybody has a conversation before the negotiation window opens, right? That never happened. But once those conversations happen, I think Jeremy Grant may realize, all right, you know what? I need to, probably look at, maybe sign an extension here. And I think Brook Lopez is in the same place. Lopez, I wrote up a piece for him on the site as well, where it is for Brook Lopez. He's also facing the over 38 rule. That makes it kind of a 3-year deal for him, but that should be more than enough. I think the Bucks want to keep him right where he is. He had a great season this year, but after what was kind of a lost season, a couple years ago, he really came back with an outstanding season, this year. So I think just get him signed to an extension. Those are two guys that I don't know. The weird thing now with free agency is because of these, we're seeing this increase in these extensions that get done on June 30th. You'll hear the Milwaukee Bucks have agreed to a new contract with Brook Lopez, because the negotiation window is already open at 6 p.m. on June 30th. But then it's going to be one of those where we're going to be like, wait, is this an extension or is this a new deal? We're going to be scrambling a little bit to figure that out. And then that's when people like me have to start doing math, because it's like, wait, is that more than what he could get in the extent? No, it's in the, all right, let's see where it goes. So I've got them kind of in the same boat.
Just because, just to clarify what you're saying there, Keith, is because up until July 1st, so on June 30th, we're still operating in 2022-23 money, right?
Correct. Yep. Even though that negotiation window is open, we're still in this current league year until we hit midnight.
Okay. I agree with you on the Jeremy Grant stand, where he's probably out there looking for 25 a year, maybe a 4 for 100 situation, and it might just not be there. Yeah. We get underwhelmed with free agent contracts. I mean, Jalen Brunson got 26. What does that look like now? 12 months later, you know what I mean? I mean, that's where we are with really our top free agents. There are two players outside of, superstar extensions like an Ayton or a Levine or a Beal. There were two players that averaged 25 million or more a year, 20 million more a year in last year's free agent class. It just doesn't happen anymore. So I think if you're going out there looking for, greener grass, bluer sky, that June 30th extension might be your best option. And then you can always force your way out, after the restriction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll say this too, one thing that it sounds great to be the Houston Rockets and have $60 million in cap space. And don't get me wrong, it is great for them until you blow $47 million of it on James Harden. Now you've got enough to sign one other kind of nice player, and that's it. Your whole summer is basically done, barring trades, which I would expect if they do. They re-sign Harden. A whole bunch of the kids on that roster, I hope they rented versus bought homes, because they're probably going to be getting moved on in trades. With that. All right, if we round out our top 10, my top 10 free agents this summer: Kristaps Porzingis, Nikola Vucevic, and Kyle Kuzma. Those are my guys to round out the top 10. All different players, but all good players. Porzingis, mostly healthy season, and had arguably the best season of his career. Yeah. He really did a lot of good stuff offensively and defensively. Challenge is, it's the Wizards. They have now a brand new head of basketball operations, Michael Winger, coming over from the LA Clippers to run the Wizards basketball ops. So we don't know how he's going to feel, right? That's a whole Just we're going to find out.
Yeah.
But going off history, this is a franchise that has tended to try to keep their own guys. And I think what you're going to see is Porzingis has a player option. I think he opts out with the idea of, hey, I can get another 4, maybe even a 5-year deal. Let's go. I don't know that it'll approach the max, but I don't think it's going to be far under it. That then puts, I'm going to skip Vucevic. I'll come back to him. But that puts then Kyle Kuzma in play, I think, a little bit more. There's no chance Kuzma extends. He makes far too little. He's only making $13 million, even with the changed rules and how much you can offer players. Instead of 120% raise, you can offer now 140% raise. It's also, that doesn't start in time to give Kuzma that's because he'll still be operating under this current CBA. So 100% can be a free agent. And I think if you're the Wizards, and again, we're going to find out how this new front office prioritizes these players here over the next month or so. Can you really go in with Beal making $50 million, Porzingis making probably $30 million, and then a whole bunch of other contracts still on the books from other guys? Daniel Gafford still jumps up quite a bit. And then you're kind of looking at it like, man, can we pay Kuzma $25 million a year? Or all of a sudden now we're a tax team that, couldn't even make the play-in tournament. That's where it gets a little bit sideways. And I think Kuzma could be a little bit more in play than, it may look like he would be, considering career year, still, young-ish as far as, his age. He'll only be 28 before next season. So I think he could be in play.
I bet there are plenty of teams right now that have Kuzma way higher on their list right now in terms of available options. Yep. A big wing who can shoot, who can get to the basket. I mean, that just reeks of the Knicks right now if they can get off that Randall contract. But there are definitely teams that have him in the top 3 of names they want to be eyeing in the next couple of months here. Vucevic,
and that's a really great point. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's a really great point too, because even though, I'm approaching this from just an overall league wide, here it is. But if I'm a team that's guard position is stacked and loaded, I probably don't even have Fred VanVleet on my list, right? Because what sense does that make? If I'm the San Antonio Spurs, there's guys on this, a bunch of the guys we just covered, they're not going to be on their list, even though they have cap space, because they're simply too old, right? It doesn't make sense for them where they're going in their contention arc. They could be even the Rockets if they were not in the Harden sweepstakes here, right? They could go a different way. Nikola Vucevic is the last. He's so all the guys I gave you up to Porzingis, then Vucevic, those are the last guys in my all-star tier. So there's only 9 players this year that I feel like are all-star tier players.
It's getting worse every year, Keith.
Yeah, it really is, because you're right. It's what it is now trades are the way, right? Like it's trades. But in this case with Vucevic, really good offensive season. I know some people are killing him because he's not a great defender. People are like, I don't know, is he really that good? He's a walking double-double. That has value in the league. He scores efficiently. He rebounds the heck out of the ball. You put the right defenders around him, he's shown he can at least hold up. He's not going to be any worse than Nikola Jokic is defensively, and with all the right guys around him. And I'm not saying he's good anywhere near Jokic offensively, but with the right guys around him, Denver's put together a good enough defense to get to the finals. So I think, in this case, Vucevic is, what's interesting is this is going to be a litmus test for where are the Bulls going, right? Are they basically saying, all right, we're kind of stuck with the Lonzo Ball contract for 2 more years. So if we give Vuce a 2-year deal, that kind of aligns him with, we'll get DeRozan's next year. We've got a couple more years of Vooch and LaVine. We'll figure out the Ball contract. Then we can really reset everything around Zach LaVine, in two years from now. I think that may be where this goes. So I think it's probably going to be a shorter deal, but probably just resigns in Chicago. They bring him back and say, hey, if we can just get a little bit healthier and a little bit better point guard play, we could be right there in the mix to be a playoff team again, next season. So that's where it is. It's what's interesting is, and I know we're not going to spend the next hours going through the rest of the list. It gets really interesting after that because there's a ton of free agents that are pretty good players that I think are guys who could really help swing things for teams, guys like, restricted guys like Cam Johnson. We already spent a lot of time on Austin Reaves, but, Grant Williams, PJ Washington, Josh Hart's probably going to be a free agent, Jordan Clarkson, Dylan Brooks, who everybody's kind of hating on right now, but is still a pretty good player, Harrison Barnes, Christian Wood, Jakob Poeltl. I mean, there's a lot of guys who are really good players that are going to help fill out, starting lineups and rotation spots and all that. It's kind of light at the top in star power.
I'll tell you what, we'll shelve the trade stuff for another day because we got a lot of good info out here. By the way, I am kicking myself for not getting Cam Johnson in this conversation. That's an offer sheet situation.
Definitely. Absolutely is. Yeah. Now,
yeah,
I think the Nets just match it and just say, because I don't think it gets super crazy with an offer sheet for Cam Johnson. I would, if I was any one of these cap space teams, I would, especially since the Nets did it to a whole bunch of teams, several years ago, I'd be like, hey, how's it feel to be on the other side? Now you can match $100 million offer sheet, but I would give him without a doubt a 4-year, $100 million offer sheet. Wouldn't even be a question in my mind. And I know somebody just listened to this and either swerved off the road or maybe threw up in their mouth a little bit because they're like, $25 million a year. That's where we're going. That's where it's headed. That's like you said, that's half of a max deal. That's where we're going. And Cam Johnson, 100% a half of a max player, like for sure. So that's just, that's the reality of the new NBA and where all these salaries are going. So I wouldn't even blink at giving him that. And you know what? The Nets wouldn't blink at offering it. You'd have to get close to a full max offer sheet for the Nets, I think, to say, I don't know about offering or matching that offer sheet. Even then, they're probably going to come kind of close because one thing working in the Nets' favor that not a lot of people are talking about, and this is so I don't keep us here for the next hours, is Mikal Bridges is on an undervalued contract already. He's only next year $21.7 million. Like that is, all of a sudden that is absolutely one of the best value deals in the entire NBA. So it's not really how it works, but if you think of it as, well, he's a max guy, well then, all right, if he's not a max guy and he's at that, then we can give Cam Johnson around the max and we're still at the same place for the two players as we would have been otherwise, true value wise. So that's just something to consider as the Nets, potentially have to match an offer sheet. My guess is, that's one of the first deals done in free agency is the Nets just lock him up themselves and don't play games with it.
Great stuff as always, Keith. What's coming up the docket on Splashtred.com? Do you have a couple in the queue for us?
Yeah, so we just put out the Bulls off-season preview. Came out just a couple of days ago. Oklahoma City will go up, I think, probably today as we record this on Thursday. It's a weird time of year here where we're in the end of the school year, so it's like I'm working around half days and my whole week's out of rhythm and everything else. But it's but we're going to get them up, and that's it for the non-playoff teams. Then we'll get into the playoff teams, and we get all those coming. We get some more free agency stuff coming out. I'm going to write my annual, and I'm gonna take a second, pat myself on the back, rookie scale extension predictions, and I think I did pretty well on a bunch of those a year ago. I nailed some of them perfectly and hit on a few others. So I'm excited to see get into that because this will be the first time it's. Man, I got to really think about this with the new super tax world we're heading into. But yeah, we get a lot of stuff coming here over the next month. Draft's less than a month away, and free agency's a month and 5 days out from starting.
I love it. Let's talk soon about possible trade candidates, which could take us 4 hours because this is a trade league, and then why don't we talk about maybe what the Spurs should be doing with their newfound lottery win here, and just how quickly they should be operating with Wemby in mind here, because I think that's a fascinating play with, you've got the value in him for at least 2 to 3 years here. Do you go all in now and just hope he's mature enough to handle it, or do you have to actually slow play this thing like LeBron's career took a few years to get going? I think that's a fascinating situation with the value in sports right now.
I'm with you because he's even kind of hinting a little bit at wanting to be good sooner rather than later. Like he's already kind of, talking about, all the winning he's going to do. So I don't know that he's going to be on board with them saying, let's let this play out for the next, 3 seasons. I think he's going to be like, no, let's try to win now. I think he's supremely confident, which is a lot of fun.
I love it. You gave me some homework there, Keith. Thanks as always.
Thank you.
My thanks to Keith. You can follow him at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter, and you can read him pretty much daily at this point on SpotTrack.com. As he mentioned, the offseason previews have been coming in rapidly, and he's going to dive into some big league, free agency, trade, rookie extension discussions as the weeks go on here and the draft and offseason approach. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spot Track Podcast.